Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today's video will be going over the first 3 episodes of X-Men 97 Season 2. As of this recording, the first 3 episodes have officially dropped and the subsequent episodes will be coming out on a weekly basis. This video will be my first impressions on the first 3 episodes, and there will be a portion of this video that goes over my general / non-spoiler thoughts, and later into the video I will go further and discuss the nitty-gritty series of events that have transpired. There will be a spoiler warning, but with that out of the way, let's get into my first initial thoughts of this season. These first 3 episodes felt like I was running a treadmill at 3 different kinds of speeds. Considering this season is playing with time travel, as each of our X-Men members are scattered across time with the purpose of trying to deter the destruction of what Apocalypse will bring about. I think the release order of these 3 episodes was smart, as it gives us a clear indicator of not only the structure of this season, but how each timeline is very purposeful for each of our members' journeys. I like that each of these 3 episodes felt tonally different from one another, while still remaining consistent with the tone we are used to of X-Men 97. Furthermore, each of these 3 episodes serve as critical pieces that are taking us on this wild journey that may even exceed that of the first season if this second season of X-Men 97 does indeed stick the landing. This season still centers around our main cast of characters, and we still get those personal character struggles, themes, and those relationship dynamics, which at the heart of all X-Men stories have these components working in tandem with each other. While those aforementioned elements are present in these first 3 episodes, I wish we got to really sit with and let those elements breathe and take up the space. While this isn't necessarily a fault of the season, as there are still more episodes on the way, I think the 30-minute runtime does work and the episodes go by in a smooth manner, but I wish we get to stay in some scenes a bit more longer before we hop onto the next thing. Although it may seem like I'm expressing worries for later episodes of this season, I'm still very much looking forward to what this season has to offer, and I felt really satisfied with what I've seen so far. Lastly, this season does introduce quite a lot of newer characters, whether they are background characters or as supporting characters. It feels like the scale of characters for this season has gone up by tenfold, and how they managed to do that while moving the current chess pieces of characters while also adding in new ones is most certainly going to be interesting to see, and I hope that this season can be able to manage that really well. Now, as we get further into the video, I want to go over the events of all 3 episodes, which means we are going to be discussing spoilers. So spoilers ahead if you've not seen the first 3 episodes of X-Men 97. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first episode opens with Bishop and Forge having made a time machine that can transport each of them to a respective timeline in which the X-Men are scattered. We follow Forge as he goes into the distant future where Apocalypse rules over the wastelands. We see that Forge meets Wolverine, Storm, Morph, Scott, and Jean as they are with the Ascani clan in this timeline. As Scott and Jean grapple with having to leave young Nathan Grey, aka Cable, by himself in this future as he embarks on his destiny of stopping Apocalypse without telling him that they are in fact his parents. Scott and Jean disobey Forge's requests from earlier, and they go out of the Ascani clan's base and they venture out only to be abducted by this version of Apocalypse's horsemen from the future. Following this, Forge and the rest of the gang have a ship that they can use to rescue them. However, they're going to need a lot more energy, which is what leads to Storm realizing she must conjure power from the solar system, specifically the sun, making Solar Storm. Although Storm is initially hesitant, it's Mother Ascani's words that convince Storm that she is most capable of the impossible, and in doing so, Storm is able to master the elements, and our team goes off to rescue the Summers family. We then see Scott and Jean talking to young Nathan at his lowest when they're all abducted, and it is in this moment where Scott and Jean admit to him that they are indeed his parents, and this was what helps him channel his powers to free him and his parents from their shackles. As Scott, Jean, and Nate are cornered by the Horsemen, the rest of the team come to turn the tide and show these Horsemen who the X-Men are. However, during all of this version of Apocalypse flees before the X-Men can invade him on his home turf, and in doing so, this frees the slaves that were once captive under Apocalypse's rule. We end the final minutes of this episode on present-day Cable as he's talking about putting together a team to find and stop Apocalypse, with Psylocke and Archangel already present, as well as Falza and Jubilee and Sunspot, who Cable is going to seek after in aiding in his mission. This leads us into episode 2. In this episode, we get a special rendition of the X-Men 97 opening intro for this new X-Men team known as X-Force, which comprises of Cable, Jubilee, Sunspot, Psylocke, and Archangel. We get shown young mutant kids who are trying to find Xavier's Institute, believing it can help shelter them from whatever it is chasing them, only for them to arrive seeing the site is abandoned and destroyed from the events of last season. The young mutants are then apprehended by none other than X-Factor, which was teased during the Life and Death story arc from season 1, as we saw a picture of Forge with this team up on his wall. We learn from the perspective of Jubilee and Sunspot, who are at this arcade laying low. We see from their perspective as they watch the news broadcast of X-Factor that they are considered to be a controversial mutant group that's spearheaded and backed up by the government with their mission of apprehending mutants. During this, Cable meets with Jubilee and Sunspot to recruit them into X-Force, which leads them to tracking down one of Apocalypse's horsemen, which is out of war, who has information in regards to what Apocalypse is planning. This leads the X-Force in successfully apprehending the Horseman, and through Psylocke, they invade his mind only for them to realize that there is a mental block inside of him. During this, we also see that Apocalypse has resurrected someone to become one of his horsemen. With no other option, the Horseman of War is killed, leaving Jubilee to question whether or not this team is doing the right thing. However, Jubilee, Sunspot, and Cable meet up with Emma Frost, as she was the last person to be in contact with War. It leads them to a location that is believed to have been where Apocalypse was last seen. However, Emma Frost had led X-Force into a trap as they are ambushed by X-Factor, and as they try to flee, Jubilee is apprehended by them. Later on, we see all sorts of young mutants that have been imprisoned by X-Factor. Jubilee, who's initially held captive, is then freed from Polaris, who was a member of this group. As before Jubilee's apprehended, she's interrogated by both Havoc and Polaris, and Polaris, who sympathizes and understands Jubilee, helps free her, and Jubilee proceeds to free the rest of the young mutants and fights through all the soldiers and escapes. The X-Force managed to not only save Jubilee, but save the rest of the young mutants from the hands of the government, making them wanted fugitives by Valerie Cooper. This episode concludes with us being transported back into the future once again, with young Nathan Gray having to send back our time-displaced X-Men to their present time, which leads us into episode 3. We open with Forge and the X-Men back in the rundown mansion, worried that Bishop and the rest of the team have yet to return. We are then transported back to 3000 BCE, where we see a young Apocalypse by the name of N-Sabanur, who launches an attack with his group of raiders known as the Sandstormers. They charge into Pharaoh Rama Tut's territory, and we also see that the other half of our time-displaced X-Men are also temporarily aligned with him, as they are using the destroyed androids to try and go back home, which works to no avail. On the other end of this, we see Charles and Magneto in conflict with one another as they are trying to tamper with Apocalypse's path, with Magneto trying to sway N-Sabanur from not becoming Apocalypse. Charles Xavier also enters the mind of Logos, one of Rama Tut's henchmen, and gets a dark premonition. Ultimately, N-Sabanur discovers what the X-Men had been hiding from him and proceeds to attack them, only for them to be rescued by Bishop. But before this fight ensues, N-Sabanur beheads Logos, which actually alerts Rama Tut to their location, sending a powerful blast, as we see their location up in smoke with the words "to be continued," leaving us on an air of mystery as to what their fate will be. See what I mean? It feels like off the jump, the show kicks into gear and doesn't stop, even as we hop from past, present, and future. But it makes a whole lot of sense why they chose to drop these 3 episodes. It gives us a sense of how this season is going about tackling Apocalypse as this main season's big bad, we see that his presence is felt throughout all timelines, which acts as the ticking time bomb for our characters to have to stop. I do like how we are tackling these themes of destiny and time, especially from the first and third episode, as we see Nathan Grey and Apocalypse as their younger selves before we see who they are. We see how the people around them help shape them into who they become, for better or for worse. For Apocalypse, he falls into that second category, no doubt. Especially with young Apocalypse and Magneto and their unlikely camaraderie, as there are two well-known antagonistic characters known to be at odds with the X-Men 99.9% of the time. We see Nathan burdened by the weight of his destiny and who he must become, while Scott and Jean try their best to raise him to make up for lost time without letting him know they are indeed his parents. It is only through this confession of them opening up to young Nathan that it helps him overcome and realize his true potential without him losing himself in the process. However, on the other side of that spectrum, we see the quote-unquote reformed Magneto try and lead Apocalypse down a better path, which is certainly interesting, and we even see during Magneto and Charles's conversation how even this level of change could bring about more harm than good on an immense and irreparable scale. We see how Magneto believes in trying to change En Sabanur for the better, but we see how Charles Xavier, who's always been about doing the right thing, being very adamant on making sure they don't align themselves with En Sabanur and not try to skew his true fate. Of course, it doesn't take much for En Sabanur to realize he had been lied to and for him to turn against the X-Men in mere seconds. I also want to mention that this episode did confirm Rama Tut by name, and as I had mentioned in the breakdown for X-Men 97 Season 2, that this version of Kang the Conqueror is one that rules over ancient Egypt. I initially was thinking that Rama Tut had a hand in time displacing all our X-Men prior to the release of these first 3 episodes, but as we learn in episode 1 that it was Mother Ascani herself that time displaced the X-Men so that they wouldn't be killed on Asteroid M and that they could help end Apocalypse across all time. For those wondering who Mother Ascani is, the close-up shot of her eyes gives it to us. She's actually Rachel Summers, the daughter of Scott and Jean from an alternate Earth who possesses abilities such as telekinesis, telepathy, astral projection, energy manipulation, and energy projection. And at one point, she was the host for the Phoenix Force, which is why we see the Phoenix in her eyes as well as the fire energy that surrounds her. Lastly, in episode 2, when Psylocke peers into the mind of the Horsemen of War, we see that Apocalypse has resurrected someone from the grave as we see this person's casket. Though it is not revealed to us as the audience, fans as well as myself strongly feel that this casket is that of Gambit's from season 1, and with the post-credits scene of last season teasing Apocalypse revisiting the desolate side of Genosha and pulling out Gambit's card from the rubble, this season could be seeing the revival of Gambit through this season's antagonist of Apocalypse as he resurrects him to become his Horseman of Death, which has occurred in the source material. Additionally, on the official episode listing for the second season, episode 8 is titled The Dead Man's Hand, which feels like it could be in reference to Gambit and his role as the Horseman of Death. Especially from the trailer for this season, we see Rogue having to grapple with the fact that when she returns to the present timeline, that Gambit won't be there waiting for her. In this cruel twist of fate, Gambit will return, but under the control of Apocalypse, and perhaps Rogue could be the one to pull him out of it, as Archangel in episode 2 references how when he was under Apocalypse's control, it was Rogue who freed him from it, which happened during the earlier seasons of the original X-Men show. Overall, this season of X-Men 97 seems to hit the ground running, and with a lot of glowing reviews, a 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and with a lot of good word of mouth, it seems as though the X-Men 97 train isn't going to be stopping anytime soon, and I'm looking forward to seeing each and every episode in store for this season and how the narrative will unfold. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe as it shows your support. Hit the bell notification icon to be immediately notified of when videos on this channel go live, and comment down below what are your thoughts on these first 3 episodes of X-Men 97, and see you all on the next video.